What prevents genocide when an oppressed people win freedom? There are numerous examples of colonial regimes ending in the last few centuries. And while most of them have involved violence, there has rarely been anything like a reverse genocide in vengeance. Examples range from Rhodesia, Kenya, and South Africa to various Asian nations like Korea and Vietnam. One standout exception is Haiti, where whole families of slave owners and their enforcers were killed, although even this wasn't a killing of all whites, since indentured servants and the Polish immigrant population were spared. But this topic has come up again in the context of Palestine and Israel in connection to a one-state solution. Many argue that without some kind of removal of Arabs to ensure a Jewish majority, a one-state system would end in genocide. So what makes fears of reverse revenge genocides so prevalent? Are they reasonable? Rhodesia, Zimbabwe came fairly close to genocide. The Hamas Charter calls for genocide of the Jews, so that fear is quite reasonable. I think the easiest answer is that liberated countries tend to have very weak governments. It's easy to get people to agree to fight the power, but still hard to get them to agree on anything else once the most immediate threat is gone. Carrying out a genocide is hard, on many levels morally, logistically, etc. You tend to need a powerful driving force to make that kind of thing happen, and most post-colonial states don't have the governmental muscle to do it even if they wanted to. The honest answer is simply cooler heads prevailed. I'm not sure there is any real reason beyond that. Less reactionary and extreme leaders of the freedom movements won out. Countries where rebellion turned to genocide, well, they didn't. I'd argue what happened in former Rhodesia, present-day Zimbabwe, was pretty close to reverse genocide. South Africa was nearly as bad, but still definitely some policies that seem more revenge-oriented than productive, like seizing land from farmers and stuff. So to address your example with Israel, let's say that the region erupted in war. The Israeli government fell, and a pan-Arab coalition army occupied all of Israel and installed a one-state Palestinian government. If that happened, there is no doubt in my mind that the Arabs would murder every Jew they could find. No doubt at all. Not every Palestinian would take part in that, I'm sure, but there would be enough who would want to kill all the Jews that it would happen. The Israel-Palestine issue considers this a risk because many Palestinian leaders, organizations, and influential individuals have historically and recently called for the destruction, elimination, and death of the Jews. For example, Hamas, the ruling party in Gaza, explicitly calls for eliminating the Jews. So what makes fears of reverse revenge genocides so prevalent? Are they reasonable? You can't possibly view the results of the massacre on 10/7 and come to any other conclusion. Mods, can we please lock this post? OP is defending Hamas's charter, and the conversation has devolved into an unproductive spat tangential to the initial question. Fears of a reverse genocide are so much prevalent than the reverse genocides themselves because they represent a rationale for not liberating the oppressed people. So people are very motivated to spread the fear. It's a rhetorical device first and foremost. Fears of genocide often occur when one group without any political power, usually a minority, especially one with a lot of visibility and scrutiny, is completely at the mercy of another group with all the power. It's one of the reasons why representation in government is important. Who better to represent the interests of that group than members of that group themselves? In the case of Israel, yes, it is absolutely reasonable. Israel exists to be a home for the Jewish people. A one-state solution that incorporates Gaza and the West Bank roughly makes the populations of Jews and Arabs equal. considering some of those Arabs explicitly do not want a Jewish Israel to exist. A one-state solution is anathema as the entire purpose of Israel. But the framing of the question is dishonest. Israel is not a colonial state. What an exceptional question. I will attempt to formulate a response, but for the moment I have to point out how insightful this point is and how I haven't heard this specific argument before. The Israel-Palestine situation is wildly different from the examples you brought up. 1. Israel is just absolutely not a colonial regime by any stretch of the imagination. This is an insane way to view the situation. 2. Hamas explicitly has the goal of killing all Jews, and their actions are 100% consistent with this goal. Many argue that without some kind of removal of Arabs to ensure a Jewish majority, a one-state system would end in genocide. Why? Is the assumption that all Palestinians are violent terrorists that would want such a thing? You could also say the Anglicans in post-revolution America, which was the mainstream church of England religion, went from the largest number of churches to basically extinct, with all members forced to go to Canada or England or convert. I remember thinking it was weird that the people that put up the separation of church and state were really focused on getting rid of this one church. There's some really tense legal arguments that could be extracted from that business. I'll just say, the Haitian Revolution was 1791-1804. Lots has changed. Reverse genocide didn't happen when the slaves in the U.S. were actually freed by Union soldiers. I'd say the fears are unreasonable. Colonial regimes want supremacy. Those under their thumb want freedom. I am horrified to be feeling concerns about the Jewish people slaughtering innocent Palestinians out of vengeance for the terrorist attacks. My heart aches to observe the cruelty that the Jewish community has levied upon the Palestinian people until now. One would hope that after suffering persecution under the Nazi regime, the Jewish people would want to do anything but what they have done. It's a narrative spread by the conductors of said genocide. If we stop, they'll do the same to us. You might want to ask historians on this one. If there are known criteria to predict what you're asking about, you're probably going to need an expert. You know what happens. The USA. That is what ultimately happens. Are we perfect? No. Not by a long shot. But we keep working towards it, with hiccups along the way. Most recently the MAGA bullshit we have been seeing. Rwanda is a pretty good recent example of something like reverse genocide. The oppressed party got power and fucking murdered the elite minority. From what I see, if the oppressors themselves get their heads out their asses, that usually helps. Don't bring it to the point of war in the first place. South Africa. Worse case than most. It ended in peace because of a strong engagement from foreign powers, including the former colonizers, coupled with leaders with a commitment to a stable society post-oppression. Lot of corruption too. But IMHO, the leadership, was the key factor here, alongside the peaceful negotiations that lead to the transition.